Douglas MacArthur's legend did not grow in comfort or certainty. It grew in contradiction, controversy, and an unrelenting belief that leadership meant accepting isolation as the price of responsibility. Because after World War II transformed him into a symbol of American victory and discipline, the world expected him to fade quietly into honor. Yet history had one more brutal test prepared, and when the Korean War erupted in 1950, it did so with chaos and desperation. North Korean forces flooding southward with such speed that the very existence of South Korea seemed destined to vanish, and once again MacArthur was called upon not just to fight, but to save a collapsing situation. And with the calm confidence of a man who had stared defeat in the eyes before, he conceived the Inchon landing, a maneuver so risky that military experts openly called it impossible, tides unpredictable, terrain hostile, enemy defenses entrenched. Yet MacArthur saw opportunity where others saw suicide, because he believed war was not won by caution alone, but by timing, surprise, and courage. And when the operation succeeded, it was not merely a victory, it was a resurrection, transforming near defeat into dominance overnight, silencing critics and reinforcing the belief that MacArthur's instincts were guided by something beyond conventional thinking. Yet, triumph has a way of sharpening conflict rather than ending it. And as United Nations forces surged north, MacArthur believed the war could be finished decisively, that hesitation would only condemn soldiers to endless cycles of bloodshed. But politics moves slower than war, and fear of global escalation clashed violently with battlefield reality, creating a fracture between military judgment and civilian authority. And in that fracture, MacArthur stood unmoving, convinced that half measures in war cost more lives than bold decisions, convinced that leaders who send men to die owe them clarity, not caution disguised as strategy. And this conviction led him to speak openly, to challenge limitations he believed were deadly, to refuse silent obedience when he felt history itself was being misled. And in doing so, he crossed the most dangerous line any soldier can cross, not against an enemy, but against the system he served. And so the moment came that shocked the world when Douglas MacArthur, undefeated in battle, decorated beyond measure, was relieved of command, dismissed not for failure, but for defiance. A decision that struck him harder than any enemy assault because it stripped him not only of authority, but of purpose. And yet even then, he did not rage or beg, but returned home with the quiet dignity of a man who had already sacrificed everything, standing before Congress to deliver words that carried the weight of an entire century of warfare. Old soldiers never die. They just fade away. Words spoken not in self-pity, but in acceptance, as if he understood that history would now fight its own battle over his name. And indeed it has for decades, branding him arrogant, brilliant, dangerous, visionary, reckless, merciful, uncompromising, often all at once because MacArthur was never meant to be easily judged. He was forged in eras where decisions were final and hesitation fatal, a man who believed promises to soldiers were sacred, that rebuilding enemies was stronger than humiliating them, that leadership demanded moral courage as much as tactical genius. And even now, long after the echoes of his voice have faded from Congress halls, his presence lingers in every debate about war and power, obedience and conscience, caution and courage, forcing the world to confront an uncomfortable truth it still avoids, that sometimes the most dangerous leaders are not those who seek war, but those who believe too deeply in ending it. And as modern conflicts rise, and nations once again struggle between political safety and battlefield reality, Douglas MacArthur's legacy stands like an unanswered challenge carved into history itself, asking a final question that refuses to fade with time. When the cost of hesitation is counted in lives, and the price of defiance is exile, will future leaders choose to follow orders? Or will they dare to stand alone, risk